the second time in 2 days, a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from sending National Guard troops to Oregon. The White House tried to deploy out-of-state troops to Portland, sidestepping the judge's Saturday ruling, which blocked the Trump administration from federalizing Oregon's National Guard. Well, now the judge has broadened that restraining order to cover troops from all states. Now, all of this comes as fresh new CBS News polling finds that 58% of Americans oppose President Trump deploying National Guard members to cities in the U.S. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand joins us this morning from the White House with more. Good morning, Natalie. Give us more on this legal back and forth over the weekend and update us on where things stand this Monday in Portland.
Yeah, good morning, Errol. The legal battle continues. This federal judge out of Oregon was actually appointed by President Trump, and she called for an emergency hearing Sunday as, again, this legal clash was continuing, and she granted this expanded temporary restraining order to block any National Guard troops from deploying to Oregon. The administration had tried to send them in to protect an ICE facility, to stand guard outside of an ICE facility in Portland, which has been the scene of a lot of demonstrations. Now, as you noted, the day before, she had blocked Oregon National Guard from deploying and then accused the administration of what she called an end run, or trying to circumvent her earlier order by trying to send troops in from elsewhere, from California. Democratic governors in California and Oregon called this an abuse of power, said that this is a matter for local law enforcement and that the conditions on the ground don't warrant the approach by the administration. Take a listen to Oregon's Governor Tina Kotek.
The facts on the ground in Oregon haven't changed. There's no need for military intervention in Oregon. There's no insurrection in Portland. There's no threat to national security. Oregon is our home. It is not a military target.
And now, yesterday, the president, speaking to reporters here at the White House, said, quote, Portland was burning to the ground. The administration painting a much different picture of what's happening there, and arguing that these troops are needed to protect federal property and federal law enforcement. The administration has appealed this latest ruling, this latest order. So this, again, will continue to play out in the courts, Errol.
All right. Appreciate the update. Natalie Brand at the White House. Thank you. CBS News correspondent Ash-har Quraishi has more on the president's federalization of troops. Ash-har, good morning. You know, the administration authorized hundreds of National Guard members to be sent to where you are. Tell us about the preparations for that and the political reaction as well.
Good morning, Errol. Well, local officials have been saying for weeks that there is no need for federal troops here. Now, hundreds of members of Illinois National Guard could be on their way soon. Many could come from the Illinois Guard over objections from Governor J.B. Pritzker. Now, the governor's office said even leadership within the Illinois National Guard has communicated to the White House that the state does not require the military right now. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
They want mayhem on the ground. They want to create the war zone so that they can send in even more troops. Now they're claiming they need 300 of Illinois' National Guard. Well, we didn't need them before they showed up.
Now, according to this memo that we obtained by CBS News, those 300 members of the Illinois National Guard will be brought under federal service and deployed to, quote, protect federal property and government personnel performing federal functions. 400 Texas National Guard are to be split up between Chicago and Portland, Oregon, Errol.
And Usher, at the top of this broadcast, we spoke about a woman shot by federal agents in Chicago over the weekend. What happened there?
That's right. DHS said the agents that were operating in that area were unable to move their vehicles and had to get out of their car. Officials say one of the drivers was boxing him. This woman and they said she had a gun, which the agency said was a semi-automatic weapon. DHS said the agents opened fire, striking the driver, who they said is a woman, as I mentioned. She is facing charges as of Sunday morning, Errol.
All right, Usher, in Chicago for us this morning. Usher, thank you very much.
I'm going to bring in CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga. Nicole, so great to see you. I heard you this morning talking about it on our morning editorial call. Break down these rulings for us and where things stand this morning.
Yeah, Vlad, certainly this has been a legal blizzard, and it bears sort of simplifying here. But as you mentioned, a federal judge temporarily blocked the Trump administration from sending any National Guard troops, federalized from out of state, into Oregon right now. Over the weekend, the administration first tried to federalize the Oregon National Guard. That was blocked, then pivoted to deploying California National Guard, blocked, and then Texas Guard troops, and that was ultimately blocked. And the state of Oregon's legal team referred to this as a game of whack-a-mole. You can see why. The president had said that the troops were needed to respond to some of the demonstrations we've been seeing at an ICE facility in downtown Portland. He called the city war-ravaged, but the federal judge has said that protests, which have been generally small in Portland, were not significantly violent or disruptive there. And local officials say, because the protests are manageable, local law enforcement can handle it on their own.
All right. But as you know, Nicole, it's not just Portland. Illinois' governor, J.B. Pritzker, says the president is deploying Texas National Guard troops to Chicago and other locations. Explain what he said and what Texas Governor Greg Abbott's response is. I mean, by deploying these troops from Texas to another state, obviously it leaves the state of Texas vulnerable to any kind of natural disaster or other incident that may happen that may require the National Guard there.
That is a good point, Vlad. Governor Pritzker sounding the alarm over the weekend. First, we should note that President Trump federalized 300 Illinois National Guard members, then announced plans to deploy some of those 400 Guard members from Texas to Chicago. Now, Pritzker said he wasn't informed of any of this. He called it Trump's invasion. Take a listen to what he said.
This judge actually said what I think should be said about all of what Donald Trump is doing, which is it's untethered from the facts. That's what the judge said, that what the government is doing, what Trump is doing, is untethered from the facts. That's the case. He was claiming that it's mayhem on the on the streets of Portland. He's saying that Chicago is a war zone. None of that is true. They're just making this up. And unfortunately, they're using every lever at their disposal to keep us from maintaining order.
And Texas Governor Greg Abbott responded to his Illinois counterpart there, posting on X that he had authorized the move. He wrote, "You can either fully enforce protection for federal employees or you can get out of the way and let the Texas Guard do it." Now, the Pentagon memo indicates troops would be there protecting federal officers and property. And we should point out, Vlad, over the weekend, a CBP agent discharged a firearm during a confrontation turned car ramming incident on the city's south side. One person was hospitalized, treated, and released. One of two people taken into FBI custody after that incident.
All right. There's a new CBS poll, Nicole, as you know, that found 58%, a majority of Americans oppose President Trump deploying National Guard members to cities in the United States, and people are getting very vocal about it. Break it down for us.
Yeah, the policy of sending troops, National Guard, to U.S. cities remains pretty divisive, Vlad. It's backed by the president's Republican base, especially those who identify themselves as MAGA, but it finds far less support beyond those folks, whether it's the National Guard or federal law enforcement going into cities. Views here are similar. Much of it, beyond the partisan breakdown, is tied to where Americans see threats to the U.S. originating from. Those who support troops in cities tend to see threats coming from inside the country, subscribing to some of the arguments made by the president and this administration that the threats are coming from our domestic enemies. But for the majority of Americans, they see dangers coming more from economic forces or feel that use of the U.S. military overall should be focused outside of the United States. Vlad.
All right, Nicole Sganga breaking it all down for us this morning from Washington. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's keep talking about this. Let's go to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi, who's joining me from the White House this morning. So, Olivia, what is the president saying about the justification for these National Guard deployments?
Well, good morning, Vlad. It's good to be with you. The president is saying that this is necessary to quell a swell of violence he says is happening in Portland. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that ICE facility, which has seen a bit of a steady stream of protest outside of it. Of course, we've seen violence at other ICE facilities across the country, but the White House is really honing in on this one in particular. Now, listen to what President Trump said yesterday about Portland specifically and why he feels he needs to send the National Guard troops there.
Portland is burning to the ground. It's insurrectionists all over the place. It's Antifa. And yet the politicians who are petrified. Look, the politicians are afraid for their lives.
Now, we know there is a federal judge who's put a restraining order on the Trump administration's ability to send those National Guard troops there. We did just get a response from the White House on this specifically. Abigail Jackson, who's a spokeswoman for the White House, said the facts haven't changed. President Trump exercised his lawful authority to protect federal assets and personnel in Portland following violent riots and attacks on law enforcement. We expect to be vindicated in a higher court. So, Vlad, they are looking to continue this appeals process in order to get those federal troops on the ground in Portland.
All right, I know you'll continue to monitor the response from the White House. Meanwhile, let's talk about this government shutdown, Olivia, which is now, as you know, stretching into a new week. We're still awaiting potential mass firings. The president indicating that it's all the fault of the Democrats if ultimately the federal government puts into place these mass firings. What are you hearing there?
Well, Vlad, the reality is we haven't seen those mass firings yet. It's been a threat, but it hasn't been put into action just yet. And in fact, there was a quote that caught my attention from Kevin Hassett, who was speaking on CNN this weekend, where he said that these layoffs will happen if President Trump decides that the negotiations with Democrats are not going anywhere. So that's a little bit of a change as we're watching these incremental changes on the shutdown, them saying they're not happening yet, but they will happen if the negotiations don't occur or move the ball forward and get the government reopened. So right now, this still remains a threat. President Trump, of course, blaming Democrats for those mass firings. He's saying that they are already happening. We do know that there's furloughs happening, but the permanent reductions in force have not been put in place just yet. So we're watching to see that and to see whether or not they are going to move forward with those mass firings and exactly who would be the target if this is perhaps the impetus for them to reorient the Department of Education, perhaps other groups here in Washington, other departments that they are honing in on. So, Vlad, we are watching for that very closely over the next couple of days.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi reporting from the White House for us. Thanks, Olivia, as always. Appreciate it.